Hello, welcome to today's lesson. Today we're learning and beginning the topic reproduction. So we're talking about living organisms, and every organism does not live forever. It continues its life in its offspring, and each offspring is produced by the process of reproduction. And in either case, this can either be sexual or asexual, but then reproduction is the process through which there is continuation for the species. Now let's look at asexual reproduction. Asexual reproduction is a process resulting in the production of genetically identical offspring from one parent. We are going to look at various examples in this lesson, but I want you to bear in mind one thing, that asexual means no sex. So which means the production of the offspring is being done with no sex involved. It's actually being done also by one parent, which means there's no involvement of two gametes, but there's only one. Alright, so we'll look at the bacteria, the fungi, and then we'll look into plants and how they reproduce. So we're just going to pick a few examples. Alright, bacteria. Bacteria reproduce by cell division or fission. So each bacterial cell can actually divide into two or more. So the chromosome replicates and the cell divides, then each cell divides again, which means each daughter plant is capable of dividing further. You see, so this process in bacteria can take place within about 20 minutes. And this is one of the reasons why it is easy and it takes a shorter while before food can get contaminated. Alright, now let's look at fungi. Now, fungi reproduce by dispersing spores. Now these spores are single-celled haploid cells, and they are usually dispersed by air currents. And when they are deposited, wherever they are deposited, they actually grow new hyphae, which grow into mycelium, and they further divide and grow. This is a micrograph of the different and various sporangia of penicillium. Alright, so we can see chains of spores are produced by fungi in its dispersion. Alright, let's look at mucor. So there is asexual reproduction in mucor, and it happens almost in the same way as penicillium or in fungi that we've just talked about. But in this case, the sporangia or the spores are not in chains, but they are actually enclosed inside these spherical bodies. So inside here there are hundreds. Inside here there are hundreds of spores, which when they are blown away, they are actually dispersed either by insects or by air currents, and they are discharged, and that is how they reproduce. So each spore actually will grow into a new parent plant. We also have toadstools, which grow on fallen trees and on vegetable matter. They are actually reproductive structures that produce spores, and the hyphae that are actually feeding are actually inside the tree, and they digest the wood. Another example is the puffball. So these ones look identically to mushroom, and what happens is whenever a raindrop hits the right puffball, a cloud of spores is ejected, as you can see, and these spores are dispersed by air currents. We also have asexual reproduction in plants. And we have different plants like the buttercup and the strawberry. They have more or less the same method of propagation. So the asexual reproduction in plants is also called vegetative propagation. Vegetative propagation. So for example, in the diagram that we have a strawberry. So this strawberry has a stem which is mostly underground and is called a rootstock. This rootstock actually supports the stems and the leaves and the flowers for the strawberry as it grows. So as it grows, the strawberry, after it has produced fruit, the lateral buds, they form a runner which is called a stolon. And this stolon becomes the genesis or the beginning of a new plant, because it begins to grow new leaves and it actually grows new roots. So after a while, this original rootstock is going to dry and die out, but then it's gonna be survived by this new bud. And then this new plant grows, actually it grows its own rootstock, sustains its own stems and leaves and flowers, giving off fruit, and the process goes on. Now, what are the advantages and disadvantages of asexual reproduction? Alright, so we have them listed here. The advantages is that in asexual reproduction there is no partner that's needed, and there are no sexual gametes that are needed. There is no seed, male seed or female seed required. The plant actually does everything on its own, and all the good characteristics of the parent are passed on to the offspring. Another advantage is that where there is no dispersal, for example with potato tubers, offspring will grow in the same favorable environment as the parent. So plants that reproduce asexually usually store amounts of food that allow rapid growth when conditions are suitable. So those are the advantages. And as for the disadvantages, there's little variation created, so adaptation to a changing environment is unlikely. So if the parent has no resistance to a particular disease, none of the offspring will have resistance, and so that's a disadvantage. There's also lack of dispersal. For example, with potato tubers, this can lead to competition for nutrients, for water, for space and light. Alright, so we move on to sexual reproduction. Now this is a process involving the fusion of two gametes, like sex cells, to form a zygote, and the production of offspring that are genetically different from each other. Fertilization. Now fertilization is the fusion of gamete nuclei. So we've got the nucleus of the male sex cell and the nucleus of the female sex cell, and they're coming together. And when they come together, that process is called fertilization. So the nuclei of gametes are haploid, and that the nucleus of the zygote is diploid. Now the haploid and the diploid, we're gonna learn that in our next chapter on sexual reproduction. All right, let's look at the advantages and disadvantages of sexual reproduction. All right, there is variation in the offspring. So adaptation to a changing or new environment is likely, enabling survival of the species. So variation in the offspring, it means the offspring will come out with different characteristics that are coming from both the male and the female gametes. And then the other advantage is that new varieties can be created, which may have resistance to disease. And in plants, seeds are produced which allow dispersal away from the parent plant, reducing competition. So it's another advantage. And as for the disadvantages, two parents are usually needed, although not always. Some plants can self-pollinate, and then growth of a new plant to maturity from a seed is slow. Alright, so that brings us to the end of our session today. Thank you for watching.